Episode number 10 of Making the Case. The only type of love is unconditional love. Let's make that case, baby. Welcome back to another episode of Making the Case. Once again, your host, Dr. Jacob Isom, author, speaker, entrepreneur, do a little bit of everything, okay? For those new to the channel, welcome. Making the Case is a YouTube show that I created to pretty much make my case on a topic of my choosing of why something is what it is, and I use evidence that I research in order to make that case. All right. For those of you returning, thank you once again for tuning in. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the bell. Make sure you like the videos. I see people watching the videos, but make sure you subscribing and you liking. All right. So I got another great topic for you. Okay. Once again, it's one of my favorites. All right. I know we 10 episode. We just hit the 10 episode mark with this video. So I'm excited about that. So topic for today's episode is the only type of love is unconditional love. So let's get into my opening statement. But before I do that, let's talk about our two channel norms. One, we attack points and not people. And number two, we don't do all the cussing and defamatory remarks. We keep it professional as always. All right. So let's get into my opening statement. So let me tell you why I believe the only type of love is unconditional love. Well, what is the opposite of unconditional love? You guessed it, it's conditional love. All right. Which it appears that a lot of us have a lot of time, particularly men, right? We know a lot of times we got to bring something to the table. So if we don't bring that something to the table, then we don't get that respect and that love from the opposite gender. Of course, I'm not talking about family, right? Your family love you whether you're broke, whether you're living on the streets. Well, that might be a little stretch, right? But your family love you no matter what. I'm talking about when we dealing with the opposite sex who may be a stranger to us, right? There are conditions to a lot of people love, all right? If someone appears to be hooked on drugs, or if someone may be physically abusive, if someone just may not fit your personality style, right? There's condition to a lot of people love. And in many cases, rightfully so, right? But can we really call that love if there are conditions attached? One would have to question that, right? So the type of love that I'm referring to is the type of love that your parents have for you, the type of love that you have for your kids, right? We know of that to be unconditional love. You can make mistakes and still be loved by someone who raised you, who birthed you. All right. So that's the type of love that we need. That's the type of love that we crave. That's the type of love that is unflinching. Now, am I advocating for people to just make mistakes and do crazy things and someone is still supposed to love you based on that? No. But what I would say is that you need to be loving. Now, I didn't start off with a definition of unconditional love because I thought we'll get into the evidence, and I have a really good video that gets into a definition of what unconditional love is. All right. I thought it was a great way to explain it. So, without further ado, let's get into our first piece of evidence.
State that distinction.
All right. I think you kind of got a gist of what he was explaining. So, from a piece of evidence, number one, of why I think the only type of love is unconditional love is we have to understand what the true definition of unconditional love is, right? So, I think he put it in a very simple way of understanding it is that we're not saying that people that can just harm you and you're supposed to love them anyway, right? We have to leave room for grace, but we also got to leave room for understanding that you just can't treat me any type of way, right? But we should be loving, right? As he stated, like a verb, right? So loving mean I'm in a perpetual state of making sure that I am I'm going to treat you the same way, regardless of what you do, which is possible, right? Which can happen, right? So some would call it God's grace or God's mercy, right? So God is an awesome God. God is a forgiving God. So you're extending that same grace, right, to other human beings. Some would, particularly those religious faith, may look at it that way, right? But I believe that people make mistakes, as I think we all do, right? That people should be able to get the benefit of a doubt, right? People should be able to have grace. People still should be able to be loved even when they make a mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are going to be heinous. Sometimes those mistakes are going to be unforgivable, but we can be loving as a human being to other people, right? So I agree with him when it comes to the definition of unconditional love. Like, we're just being loving people, right? So we can still be in a state of loving somebody, even though we're disappointed with somebody. That still can happen. Like I said, it happens with our children, it happens with our parents, right? We experience that unconditional love when it comes to parenting or being someone's child, but then that cuts off when it comes to friends, when it comes to romantic situations, and etc. Right? It's like we have two branches of love, all right? And I just believe that the only type of love is unconditional love, all right? So let's get into my second piece of evidence. So my second piece of evidence of why I believe the only type of love is unconditional love, we're going to dive into, well, what does unconditional love look like, right? Kind of what the signs to look for so that you know that somebody is really loving you unconditional. All right. So I'm gonna read an article from a platform called Dive Through, which I think deals with more the psychological aspect of relationships when it comes to unconditional love. This was actually written by a social worker. Let me get you her name. Natalie Asayag. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the title of this is What is Unconditional Love in a Relationship? 8 great examples. All right. I won't be getting into all the examples, but I did want to go over a few of them with you. All right. For those who grew up listening to love song, we bet you were pretty busy imagining what your future love life will look like and daydream about who you'll be with forever and ever. Off romance. We remember it well. But if you haven't been in a relationship where unconditional love is a major player, you might be wondering, what does it mean to love someone unconditionally? What is that even supposed to look like? We got you, boo. All right. So I kind of agree. A lot of us didn't grow up in situations where we can actually see an example of what unconditional love looked like. Or even if we thought it, it was very toxic, right? It was an unhealthy relationship. So we thought that just because someone stayed because they was putting up with stuff, that maybe that's unconditional love, which I would beg to differ. All right, let's keep reading. Unconditional love has a lot of layers. Shrek would probably argue that it resembles an onion or an ogre. Relationships aren't easy, no matter what the dynamic is, and there can be a lot to consider when difficult and strenuous situations pop up. And sometimes when this happens, the unconditionalness can start to feel more like an obligation rather than a selfless act of kindness. So let's break it all the way down together. We get into what unconditional love really is and what it really isn't. All right. So, what is unconditional love? Let's get into it. Wow, that's a heavy term, isn't it? No strings attached, no expectation, no fine print, just unconditional. The problem with the term unconditional love is that it has a different definition for everyone who uses it. And this can get a little tricky because it can lead to us putting unrealistic expectations on ourselves or our partners. For some people, it might mean defending their friend regardless of whether they are right or wrong. For others, it may mean being the responsible one and calling out a friend when they're making a questionable decision. Either way, it's really about giving into the vulnerability of loving someone wholeheartedly. Unconditional love can be between just about anyone in any kind of relationship, friendships, romantic relationships, the relationship between a parent and child, you name it. We can even see this type of love for our pets. But what does unconditional love really look like? And it's funny they mention pets because I believe that people have more unconditional love for their pets than they do some humans. Please, if I'm wrong, please put it in the comments because I would love to hear your opinion about that. So, number one, no strings are attached. Loving someone unconditionally means that you don't have an ulterior motive or unspoken expectation of obligation for the other person. No condition, just love. It's totally selfless act of caring for another person without thinking about how these acts could benefit you in the future. And I believe that is very hard for people, right? Because a lot of people, like I said earlier, have conditions to their love. It's like a tit for tat thing. Well, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. All right. But to me, unconditional love means that, well, I'm not expecting you to do something. I'm doing it at the count of my heart. I do it because I'm loving you. Right. Now, do I want to keep doing for you and then not getting anything in return? No. But I'm not waiting for that tit for tat situation. All right. Number two, partners support each other. Supporting your partner, anyone you love for that matter, can bring a lot of happiness and health to a relationship. Helping your partner through tough times, emotional struggles, and life changes can help you accomplish more together than you ever likely could on your own. Likewise, you get to share the good times and celebrate your individual wins together. The keys to supporting your partner are open communication, honesty, kindness, and equality. Now, I wouldn't say that equality. Of course, I would replace it with equity, but I think you get the gist. So the communicating honesty, and I would throw in trust. Those are the linchpins. That is the foundation to any healthy relationship. All right. So it's no wonder that it will be the foundation to unconditional love. The third one, partners honor requests without compromising themselves. This is a massive point that we want to really emphasize. Loving someone unconditionally does not mean that you can't have boundaries. We'll get more into boundaries and love a little later, but for now, we have to talk about your needs. The person or people you love can ask for your help, but you're not obligated to help or agree to their request if it goes against your own needs, boundaries, or morals, right? So you should always have boundaries for every single person in your life. You should always have things that you are going to do for them and that you won't do for them because you don't want to handicap them. This particularly includes your children, right? So we always want to set healthy boundaries for people. That is love. That's not saying that you don't love them because you telling them no. When you tell somebody no, that is a form of love. All right. Number four, tough times are worked through with kindness. It's only natural for a relationship to hit rough patches. No one is perfect. No one has a perfect relationship. You might be close, but we're all bound to have disagree every once in a while. Forgiveness, kindness, listening skills, and calm communication are made a pleasure when it comes to working through spots. So when you are going through things, you're not cussing people out. Maybe your voice might change a little bit, but it's all through love. It's all through getting through a situation. Okay. That's a sign of unconditional love. That there's not no interior motive. You don't have jealousy, there's rage, there's anger. It's how can we work through this? And the last one I want to go is partner provides security for each other. With unconditional love, there's no fear or sense of uncertainty. It's secure, kind, and loving. You don't feel like you have to walk around on eggshell to placate the other person. It's safe and warm, and it's emotional space without judgment that you share with the other person. So I know a lot of times we talk about like creating a safe space for people, which is extremely important. And when we talk about creating a safe space, we're talking about an environment where you don't feel judged, where you can be vulnerable, where you don't feel like the other person is attacking you, because that's huge, right? Particularly when you're in conflict, disagreement, you do not want to feel attacked. You should be able to communicate and talk over issues and points calmly and articulate yourself so that no one feel like, well, I feel like this is lingering from another disagreement we had, but I thought we already solved that, right? So these are the different points of unconditional love that you should be looking for. You should be aiming. And if you don't have these points, I'm not sure it's unconditional love, right? Let's get into our last piece of evidence. All right, so my third piece of evidence of why I believe the only type of love is unconditional love actually comes from a research article from Philosophy and Religion, and this title, Unconditional Love, question mark, by Christopher Cordner. So it's funny about this piece of evidence is this kind of is a counter argument to my point that the only type of love is unconditional love. So This article is actually 12 pages long, and it's a very great article, actually. And of course, I just want to read certain sections to you and read the points he's trying to make. He's actually trying to make the point that there's no such thing as unconditional love, right? So I want to read to you some of the points that he actually made, which actually are some good points. All right. So let's get into it. Let me scroll down for you guys. I want to read this public interest statement. We are creatures capable of love, but that does not mean we automatically understand ourselves as creatures who love, which I actually agree. When parents, for example, assert that they love for their children is unconditional, it may not be very clear at all, even to them, what they're really saying. This matters for more than one reason. It matters to us that we not be ignorant or self-deceived about our lives. Beyond that, we don't individually create the language we use to articulate who and what we are. We inherit it from our ancestors and absorb it and adapt it from cultural world. But the language we currently have may not always answer to our real needs. Now, he makes a good point that pretty much saying that we might not even understand what the word love means and how to love, which actually I do agree with that. Like, I don't think a lot of us know how to love, particularly coming from the environments that we come from. Um, and I think that's the reason why we have a lot of issues and trouble in our relationships, the reason why we can't stay the long haul. We haven't seen a lot of people in our family, in our communities that are married 30, 40, 50 years, right? Those days are kind of gone. We may have, some of us may have grandparents that are, but that type of love is rare. But that doesn't mean that unconditional love doesn't exist and cannot exist for all different types of relationships. So let's keep reading on. Unconditional love gets mentioned quite often these days. The commonest context and the one often thought to offer the best grip of the idea is the love of parents for their children, which I mentioned earlier. Sometimes the context is what parental love should be like or what ideally be like. Sometimes it is parents implying that their love for their children and also other parents' love for their own children actually is unconditional. But is there any such thing as unconditional love? It has been widely held that the idea of such love has its source in religious thinking. The Judeo-Christian God is held to have unconditional love for us, his human creatures. This love is often labeled with the Greek word agape. The suggestion is that we human beings can, by God's grace, ourselves be enabled to love others unconditionally, even this actually more rarely than we might hope. See, I mentioned earlier that it's kind of related to a religious context that, well, God love us unconditionally. No matter how much we sin, God gonna love us, right? And so with that type of thinking, well, that means that human beings are capable when it comes to other human beings. All right. So if we think about it from that aspect, then yes, it can exist. But I believe unconditional love can exist outside of the religious context, right? But it's about understanding who you are and understanding that human beings are naturally flawed. Let's keep reading. But many who now speak of unconditional love make no reference to a religious context and do not suppose themselves to be relying on one to give substance or sense to their claims about loving unconditionally. That suggests that even if the idea of unconditional love did have its origin in certain religious thinking, the idea might still continue to pollinate in life and practice of non believers, even of a society of them. For more than one reason, though, this possibility might be thought shaky even if the idea of unconditional love as a possibility for human beings can linger a while after the decline of religious sensibility. Perhaps it will soon enough atrophy without religious backing. But even if that were not so, maybe we should still avoid all temptations to think about loving as capable of being unconditional. In his recent books, Simon May said just this: by inputting to human love features properly reserved for divine love, such as the unconditional and eternal, we falsify the nature of this most conditional and time-bound and earthly emotion and force it to labor under intolerable expectation. So he's making the case that, well, the only type of unconditional love is divine love, and that comes from the creator. Well, if we're supposed to be made of God's image, then there are a lot of people that say that we're divine beings. Then wouldn't we be capable of divine love? See, I think it's just a matter of perspective, right? So if you understand how to love yourself, shouldn't you understand how to love other people? It's all about perspective, right? It's very subjective. Now, maybe there are some objective ways of looking at love, and I think most people would agree what loves look like. There'll be a lot of commonalities, right? But how to love, when to love, it's going to be very subjective. But I think unconditional love is definitely obtainable because if you're looking at it from a religious context or a non-believer context, and you say, I have this deep feeling of, man, I want to protect this person, right? Sometimes from themselves, right? I want to make sure my love exude that I have for myself to this other human being that I can see is just like me, my brother or my sister. So I believe that's the only type of love we really have. Conditional love just means that, wow, if how many mistakes do I need to make before this person not love me anymore? What type of world will we really exist and live in if we just love that way? So I believe the only type of love is unconditional love. All right. So let's get into my closing statement. So hopefully I've made the case on why the only type of love is unconditional love. We're always going to put parameters on or what we know of as walls, right? Because we know people hurt us in the past or because of our trauma, our experience, right? That now we have barriers to protect us, right? That's one thing, right? And eventually, maybe through therapy, counseling, we'll work through that and we'll open ourselves up to be vulnerable once again. But the whole notion or idea that we're going to love based on conditions is, in the long run, it won't work, right? As I just stated, like, if I know that you're going to leave me or love me based on what I can do for you, that just is a situation that's doomed to fail. All right. The reason why we have such great relationships, if you have them with your parents and with your children, is because they know deep down inside that if they do make a mistake, even if they make a mistake directly towards you and it may come off as vindictive and hurtful, that you still gonna love them. You're gonna love on them. You still gonna have love for them. And yes, a lot of it is due to the fact that they came out your womb or they came from your loins or that they're your seed. You're their seed. Yes, a lot of it is based off that. But at the end of the day, that counts for something. But what also counts for something is the fact that you know that this person is going to be with you through thick and thin. And yes, they're not going to be happy with you, but they still going to love. They're going to be loving to you, right? That can exist outside the parent-child relationship. It can. It can exist in romantic relationships, in friendships. I have a great group of friends that we have unconditional love. Now, it's always easy to practice not hurting people you love, right? That should be the first thing that you should set up, right? The honesty, the communication, the trust. It helps. That foundation helps to make sure that unconditional love is not being shaken, right? But at the end of the day, when mistakes are made, can I look at you as a human being? Can I look at you as a friend? Can I look at you as someone that I love and say, you know what? How can we work through this? Now, I'm not saying there's not going to be time where it's like, wow, you really broke my heart. You broke my trust. I don't know if I can ever get there with you again, but I still love you. So you can still be loving, even though you don't have the same type of relationship anymore, right? As they say, you can love somebody from a distance, but that don't mean you stop loving them. All right. Man, that's today's video, man. I thought we made the case. Please leave your comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, man. Please let me know how things are going over here. All right. Once again, check out that merch. Link gonna be in the description. Please pick up both books. Third book coming out real soon. So as always, I'm you, you are me. Love always, love eternal. The worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. And I just made that case, baby. Deuces.